The MAGA House has been very busy at getting nothing done, which is par for the course for this Congress. Top of their list was the impeachment of a cabinet secretary over policy differences. A useless tit-for-tat move that exposes their ignorance and hypocrisy. After all, they've spent the last few years screaming that you cannot impeach somebody without a crime. Yet here we are with them impeaching somebody over policy differences and maladministration. I'm sure the founding fathers are spinning in their graves as we speak. And once again, it was all political theater with no substance. Welcome to another episode of the Cypher Report, where we give you the tools, information, and analysis you need to decrypt the world. In today's episode, we'll be covering the failed impeachment of Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas. Before we get into that though, hit that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. But let's go ahead now and get started. The effort to impeach Mayorkas started as a pet project for Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, and the rationale for the impeachment is both the refusal to comply with the law and a breach of the public trust. The matter came for a floor vote where debate on the bill was what we've come to expect from these things.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of HRES 863, impeaching Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Alejandro Mayorkas is guilty of aiding and abetting the complete invasion of our country.
So this is the first exaggeration that we're going to see from Republicans on this issue. We've talked about it before, but there isn't an invasion of the country from the southern border. There is a large number of people fleeing persecution, whether it be from gangs or their government, and there's a smattering of economic migrants and other people coming into the country from the southern border, seeking asylum, refugee, and economic opportunity. You know, the kind of things that America has always been about. This is not an invasion. There's no concentrated effort in order to take over the United States or to change the United States. And this is all kind of wrapped up in the whole great replacement theory that a lot of Republicans seem to really have latched onto. And it's a thing that has happened in the United States before, with reactionary sentiment being increased by a influx of immigrants coming into the country. We've seen this going all the way back to the 1800s, shortly after the founding of the country, where the Know Nothing Party was created. We had a lot of people in the Ku Klux Klan saying there's too many immigrants from Italy and Ireland and the like, then trying to dilute things and that sort of stuff. And this is all kind of the same thing, what they're talking about. The rhetoric might have changed a little bit. There are different people involved, but it's the same sentiment. So that's what's going on here. There's not an invasion. There's a lot of people trying to seek economic and safety. So economic opportunity and safety in the United States, which is what the United States has always been about. So right there, that's wrong. And this whole idea that it's all gangs and drugs and criminals is also incorrect. Well, we're going to let her talk here. We're going to interrupt as we need to, and then we're going to go on.
Country by criminals, gang members, terrorists, murderers, rapists, and over 10 million people from over 160 countries into American communities all across the United States.
Again, this is something that the United States has the capacity to absorb, and the fact that it's 160 countries across the U.S., it's not really a big deal.
His willful refusal to secure the border has bankrupted communities, closed down U.S.
At no point has any community been bankrupt because of immigrants. Now, we are seeing a new issue come up within some blue states like Illinois and New York, where they recently passed laws to guarantee people housing and other things like that. And that is putting strain on those resources that are fairly new because, they don't want to see people freeze to death in like Colorado, Illinois, and New York during the harsh winters that we're having, as Texas and Florida bus migrants into these cities without telling them when they're going to be there and, then having to get these services. Whereas if this was Texas government isn't going to give people any of those resources at all. Never have, never will. And it's always been charity that has helped out immigrants on the southern border states for the most part. And so that's what we're seeing there. So there is some issue with that, but there's not a lot of issues with bankrupting communities and making them inherently less safe and all that other nonsense that she's going to be getting into the entire speech here. Again, this goes for about 3 minutes, so let's let her continue.
U.S. schools that our children attend, drowned hospitals, and incapacitated law enforcement while empowering criminal cartels and
the incapacitating law enforcement thing. There was recently an attack against, I believe, a New York police officer from an immigrant. I don't know where that immigrant was from off the top of my head right now, but that didn't happen. But again, it's not like the biggest, it's not like a huge deal. It's not something that's like an invasion level.
Illegal aliens. My Democrat colleagues argue that one cannot be impeached over policy differences. Well,
True, cannot be impeached over policy differences, cannot be impeached not only of policy differences, but of maladministration. Everything that she is talking about in the next few lines here is maladministration, which means doing the job badly. It's not they're not refusing to enforce the law. We've turned around 3 million people roughly since Biden took office, whether or not that's from internal deportations or border turnarounds or border expulsions. 3 million people have not been let into the United States. That means the laws are being enforced. They might not be enforced as much as Republicans like Green would want, but they are being enforced. Don't forget that.
I argue that breaking our laws is more than just policy differences. 300 dead Americans every day from fentanyl poisoning is more than just a policy difference.
So I just rolled my eyes from that, right? So fentanyl is being made in-house now. Fentanyl does not require a lot of equipment or chemicals to be made. It's very easy to make. You can look up the directions to make the stuff online and get those ingredients by ordering them from either American suppliers if you have the right connections, or overseas, India, China, Singapore. I believe other stuff is coming from Pakistan at this point, and I think Vietnam are where a lot of these chemicals, precursors, the chemicals made to use fentanyl, are coming from, right? So what we're seeing there is the fact that we're having a large amount of fentanyl come into the United States and be created in the United States. And it's not, only illegal immigrants or people from the southern border bringing it in. It's Americans. The fentanyl is coming from inside the house. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Difference. It's murder. Today in my own office, narcotics law enforcement officers from Georgia told me that 7 out of 10 Oxycontins or Percocets sold on the street are laced with fentanyl, and that comes directly across the border from Mexico. Secretary Mayorkas has violated numerous provisions in the Immigration and Nationality Act, including unlawfully directing DHS to mass parole illegal aliens into the U.S.
So this is another issue with Republicans and what they want the United States to do. So the reason why there is a parole system at all is due to spacing issues and mercy. So what happens is the United States government, under the auspices of the Department of Justice and the executive branch, can give people temporarily legal entry into the United States under what is known as parole. That does not give them full legal status. That does not put them on a pathway to citizenship. It can be revoked at any time. It doesn't even necessarily include the ability to get a work permit. So all that right there, right? It is temporary. It can be revoked at any time. This isn't a huge, necessary thing. The reason that it's being done is because of the number of people coming into the United States, as well as lack of space to house them in a manner that is humane. Republicans seem to want a lot of detention centers built on the border and have people that are coming into the United States for asylum to remain in detention until their case can be heard. How many people do Republicans want to put in prison for the act of basically trespassing? They want to create detention camps. Some would even say concentration camps, due to this number and size and people that are going to be remained in those on the border indefinitely. which is something that Lindsey Graham himself has suggested as a measure of deterrence in his bill that he tried to get through the Senate in 2019 in order to deter people from trying to enter the United States and keep them locked up until their cases are heard. We have a 5-year plus asylum process right now due to the lack of judges and the lack of processing for people that are seeking asylum. How many people do you want to keep in prison? Answer that question for me, because that is where you and I, if you want this, are going to most likely disagree on. But we got to continue on.
When federal law specifically prohibits this, and unlawfully implementing catch and release policies when federal law specifically mandates the detention and removal of inadmissible aliens. In fact, detention.
This is another issue with Green here. They legally are supposed to get an asylum hearing. You can complain that there's too many people seeking asylum, that a lot of it's fake, but under the law that Republicans just refused to pass, which we'll get into in a future segment, have to get an asylum hearing before the law. So here she's lying again.
Facilities under Mayorkas have been mostly vacant because of such unlawful policies. The largest detention facility in California, which can house almost 2,000 illegals, is currently housing only 6 illegal aliens.
Again, detention for what? Seeking asylum? I don't get it.
He has violated his oath of office and breached the public trust by willfully refusing to ensure the laws passed by Congress and signed into law by the president are faithfully executed as required by Article 2 of the Constitution. He has allowed over 10 million illegal border crossers to invade our country.
Again, there isn't evidence of this.
Approximately 2 million of whom are known gotaways. These are people who have completely evaded U.S. authorities. And
again, this is an exaggeration of what's going on. The 10 million number includes repeat entries. This is not what's going on.
Roaming the interior of the American communities, assaulting, raping, and murdering Americans. And God help us if we have a terrorist attack on our land.
All fear-mongering all the time.
His subversion of the law has resulted in the highest number of illegal alien encounters in a single day, in the highest number of illegal alien encounters in a single month, and the highest number of illegal alien encounters in a single year, surpassing every national record on each account.
But that's what Green has to say. For the last bit that she just said, this is a thing that isn't necessarily attributed to any one particular administration or any one particular policy. Most of the issues that are causing people to come to the border are not issues that are inside America's control. These are push factors rather than pull factors, which we will be talking about in future segments on our Cipher State program with immigration lawyers and analysts that are very knowledgeable at this, so be sure to stay tuned to that. But let's continue on. Green quoted statistics in her speech that are literal misinformation, as we just went over. Now, if we fact-checked every single MAGA rant, we would never get to the news. But there's a couple of glaring lies here that we need to address forthrightly. First up, the hard-right anti-immigrant faction loves to say that immigrants are criminals. They parrot the former president who says at every opportunity that the people pouring over the border come from foreign mental hospitals and prisons. According to the National Institute of Justice, however, quote, although there are arguments that stringent immigration enforcement policies are needed to combat increased risk of crime by undocumented immigrants, recent research suggests that those who immigrate legally or otherwise are not more likely and may even be less likely to commit crime in the United States. Green's next claim is that 10 million undocumented immigrants have entered the U.S. under the Biden administration. This is misinformation repeated often by many anti-immigrant activists. According to the Federation for Immigration Reform, or FAIR, a right-wing think tank that we will cover in future segments as well, quote, in truth, we do not know exactly how many people cross the border illegally and evade immigration authorities, nor can anyone adequately quantify overstays or gotaways. Gotaways are estimated based on people the Customs Border Patrol agents see on cameras, but are unable to catch, typically due to lack of resources. That estimate is actually about 600,000 in a given year. not 10 million. According to the Pew Research Center estimates, the total unauthorized immigrant population in the United States reached 10.5 million in 2021. That was a modest increase over 2019, but nearly identical to 2017. In other words, that includes all illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants that have been in the United States from all time, not just the ones that have entered the United States since Biden took office. Additionally, the number of unauthorized immigrants living in the US in 2021 remained below its peak of 12.2 million in 2007. It was about the same size as 2004 and lower than every year from 2005 to 2015. Finally, Green's claim that fentanyl is a huge problem is correct. This is why President Biden has reached an agreement with President Xi Jinping of China to address the production of compounds used to make the deadly drug. But it's important to note that it is not immigrants, legal or otherwise, who are bringing fentanyl across the border. Americans are often the smugglers. The rest of Green's statement is largely based on hyperbole and outright lies. Throughout the floor debate on the impeachment resolution, Democrats pushed back on the Republicans' flood of disinformation. Here's Representative Benny Thompson and Lou Correa.
The border is not open. In fact, under Secretary Mayorkas' leadership, this administration has removed, returned, or expelled more migrants in 3 years than the Trump administration did in 4 years. With that, I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Correa, the ranking member on our border subcommittee.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
And thank you, Madam Speaker. We have something in common with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. This country, Main Street, every one of our districts has a challenge with fentanyl. We've all witnessed the deaths in our communities, good young men and women, from fentanyl, from this scourge. But Secretary Mayorkas is doing his job. I want you to look at this graph. The seizures at the border of fentanyl. 2019, 2,800 pounds. 2023, 27,000 pounds of fentanyl seized. Ladies and gentlemen, I just got back again from visiting the border. I went to San Isidro, and again I asked the men and women in uniform, again I asked them, what do you need from us to double these numbers? Simple answer. We want more resources. We want more personnel, more drug-sniffing dogs. We want more equipment. Some of those agents were struggling. They were working double shifts. Women, moms, men, fathers saying, we don't have time for our families. We're going to have to find another job. And right now, we have a solution. We have legislation that the Senate has worked on with Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, and the President supporting a solution that will bring resources to the border. And the majority party here refuses to bring that legislation forward for a vote. Who's derelict on their duty? We must step up and make sure that we protect Main Street and we help Secretary Mayorkas do his job and double these numbers.
And finally, here's Thompson outlining Republicans' objections to the impeachment effort.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, even some House Republicans have acknowledged that there's no constitutional basis for impeachment. Representative McClintock called this effort an unconstitutional abuse of power and reckless, partisan, and unserious. Representative Buck said it's not an impeachable offense. This is a policy difference. Mr. Speaker, besides failing to articulate a single cognizable charge that would meet the constitutional impeachment standard of high crimes and misdemeanors, this sham impeachment has been marred by procedural failures.
However, the impeachment effort did proceed, but it was not successful. Let's talk about that. Now, when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker, she never brought a bill to the floor that didn't pass. She worked hand in hand with her majority whip and always knew exactly where every member of the House stood on any given bill. But the embarrassment of failed floor votes in this Congress is a feature, not a bug. For this impeachment vote, the majority whip had done the count. Speaker Johnson was apparently confident that they had the votes to squeak by, even counting 3 Republicans who publicly said they would vote no. All but one Democrat was present for the debate on the bill. That was Texas Representative Al Green, who was in the hospital following emergency abdominal surgery. Republicans counted on Mr. Green missing the vote. But Green, having seen the news that Republicans were holding this vote, made a deal with his doctors and signed himself out of the hospital. He showed up in a wheelchair wearing a hospital gown and socks for the dramatic final moments of the vote. This was obviously a shocking moment for Republicans in the House.
On this vote, the yeas are 214 and the nays are 216. The resolution is not adopted. For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Moore of Utah moves to reconsider the vote on adoption of House Resolution 863.
The question is on the motion to reconsider. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
This is what Marjorie Taylor Greene had to say about Mr. Green's surprise appearance.
Democrats hid one of these votes that they had, so it wasn't something that people would see. Is that something that Republicans?
I'm glad you asked that because, well, we can basically look at this as a game, unfortunately, and their strategy. And they hid one of their members, waiting to the last minute, watching to see our votes, trying to throw us off on the numbers that we had versus the numbers they had. So yeah, that was a strategy at play tonight.
So do you essentially see this as an attendance issue in your
Man, it always seems that Green is quick with the conspiracy theories. But let's continue. All Democrats and 4 Republicans voted no on the bill. Those House Republican members are Representative Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin, Tom McClintock of California, Ken Buck of Colorado, and Blake Moore of Alabama. Representative Moore changed his yes vote to no in a procedural move that allows Republicans to bring the resolution up for consideration again at a later date. Representative Al Green said,
I'm lying here in the hospital bed and I see that they're going to bring up this vote. So I talked to the staff here at the hospital and I had to negotiate with them. I had to sign a document explaining to me the possible harm that could befall me. But I had to cast this vote. This is my job. When I get there, I go into the attending physician's area, and they had a bed for me. I didn't want to make a spectacle by going out there and sitting in a wheelchair. So when I got there, I took my card, and I put my card in that terminal myself. There are people saying that I didn't really vote. I did. And after I voted, David Scott, who was seated right near me, said, Al, you just tied the vote. They can't impeach him. I had no idea when I put the card in that would happen.
A spokesperson for House Speaker Mike Johnson said that they fully intend to make more votes on the matter. Again, theater over substance. As we've reported previously, Republican Representative Steve Scalise missed the vote as he's undergoing treatment for cancer. He's expected back in the chamber in the coming days. If the impeachment vote passes, it will be the first time a cabinet member has been impeached since 1876. If it happens, there is little doubt it will be dead on arrival in the Senate, though. It is our estimation that the primary reason why these votes are happening and will continue to happen is to continually give red meat to their base. Republicans need to show that they are pushing forth effort in order to bring Democrats to task on issues that matter to their voters. And the top issue for their voters is the immigration issue, illegal or otherwise. And don't be surprised if there's little accomplished in the next few months as the general election gets closer and closer. Because if one thing that Republicans want to do is stop Biden from getting any wins prior to the election. But my friends, that concludes this episode of the Cypher Report. Be sure to hit that like button again for the algorithms. It really does help us out. And be sure to join us next time for the tools, information, and analysis you need to decrypt the world.